Hi, this is Dan Levy. I'm here with Henry Blevins. We are here to do some open source for the Hacktoberfest, my favorite time of year. And I guess let me do the intro of, I'm one of the instructor program managers at Lambda School. If I can get my title right, I did do some instruction there. And I had the privilege of working with Henry Blevins, who was our resident Lord Blevins. And and so, Henry, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a former student and team lead at Lambda School, and I'm currently working as a software engineer at Maple.
Excellent. They're very lucky to have you. And thank you for joining me. I really wanted to go through one of my favorite techniques for finding open source contributions. And I've done a talk on this, but I wanted to get into the weeds and actually go through this process like hands-on and kind of cover it from scratch. So basically, it starts with, have you worked on a project recently? If so, cool. You need to look through your package.json requirements.txt and your dependencies graph. Scan that list of packages. So the idea is we want to find a package that did not spark joy. And there's got to be some package that you want to Marie Kondo just out of this world, but if your project depends on it. The reason we want to find a project that sucked or was difficult to integrate is because it likely isn't really inherent to the project. Probably a sign that we can help. And now that you've already done the work to figure out how to integrate the project, there's almost certainly something you can do to take your learnings back to the project, whether it's sharing the code snippet that worked and just replacing the one that's on the README that caused you hours of pain or whatever it is. Going through that process is the last 10% of effort that separates someone who's struggled through getting a library going and someone who's an open source contributor that is actually helping the community and helping everyone use that package without the same trials and tribulations you've gone through. So that last 10% is a huge opportunity that most developers just fail to capture on. You know, the fact that you got the library implemented that gave you trouble should be a reminder or a point that you write in your notebook, hey, on the weekend, hey, let me make a contribution back to the parent project or back to the upstream project. And it really can be something as simple as, oh, the instructions weren't written well, or the steps were out of order. Things that are trivial like that can make a big difference in people's ease of getting set up. I had someone struggling with instructions the other day because they were clearly switching between NPM and Yarn, and it was it was something that a senior dev could have easily just overlooked, and I could totally see it. I've interchanged them before. I've said do an npm install as I'm typing Yarn, and just so those oversights it's too easy as someone who's new to the industry or even a senior dev. It's too easy to assume that those times you see that must be how it's supposed to be. That project, oh, everyone uses this project. There's 10,000 stars. Clearly it's me. It's not. It can't be them. Chances are it is them, and in almost every case you can make it better. And take that opportunity, take that recent pain or struggle that you've gone through and learn from it. So that is the condensed message of this, of my open source process. I've used it to contribute to, I think about 27, 28, 10,000 star projects, GitHub star projects, the tongue twister. And they range from Docker to Node.js to Slate, which is a Ruby documentation framework, to a React router, projects all over the development ecosystem in many different languages and disciplines. It doesn't mean I'm a Ruby expert or anything like it. It just means that I struggled through implementing something, found a bug, and fixed it. And my contribution was just a few lines, but I'm sure it was enough to help someone else. And you know, it's a really great rewarding feeling when you are able to connect what you've been able to struggle through and benefit from personally to go and share it back. And finding out, realizing that it's only that 10% effort is something I hope to show here tonight, and hope to work through with Henry. So Henry, now that you've heard my pitch, do you have a recent project or package JSON we can look through and see what?
I don't know what I could provide on the spot. I know I've had.
So this wasn't rehearsed. So I really did just put him on the spot. So
yeah. I know we were talking about some documentation on some projects the other day that was less than ideal. We could take a look at Joy and try to fix that up.
Yeah, I think there's some opportunities there.
Yeah.
So I know you've been working in your new code base at work. I'm sure you can't share any of that stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're doing full stack TypeScript. So the big thing for me is like, well, yeah, I have to write types for different packages.
Yeah. Oh man, that's God, what are they doing? Yeah, I hope you get paid by the character.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's pull up the package Joy, because we've talked about it before, and I've had a lot of experience with it, and I've had a lot of experience helping students go through it. And the thing that I've noticed is as people are scanning the API docs, there's a common place where they get lost. Henry, do you want to share your screen and maybe walk through it, and I can navigate you through this process?
Yep.
So
there we go.
Excellent. So here is the README, and presumably you'd click Documentation API. That used to be on the README there, this content. Okay, so just go ahead, scan this, Henry. Let me know what
yeah.
Like, try to put yourself in the shoes of
Yep. So we're installing we're requiring things, and this is really just the stuff you kind of skip over. And oh, I've got some schema here that I define. Maybe this looks similar to me if I've used other type of schema validators. And then we get to here, right?
mm-hmm.
And this is where we're using the schema. And I think this is, at least to me, where this kind of falls apart, because we see this as an example here, right? So we're like, oh, this is how I use this. And then suddenly this is actually 3 separate use cases of different functions. And it's not apparent to me what the goal is when we run each one of these things, or even what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And so I don't know why I expected that to take you any longer, but that's exactly the problem. Yeah, because this is basically showing you a comment out, and that's these lines. That is as though it were a REPL, or you're in some interactive inspector in a browser, maybe. Which, well, that's a assumption that I don't know they should make, and then there's something different below in the try catch where they do just a const value. Well, why isn't it const value above? Like, why not? And the whole deal of the error being optional, like just a few lines of code here would go a long way to tell the story of how you handled success in that first example and how you handle failure on that next one. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go through and really capture, now that we've identified this weakness here, that in fact, we can do a few things to solve. We can just pick one of those just to show the process, because I really want to capture the whole submitting a PR, making these changes. And for something like this, it might be possible to even make these changes in in the github.com website. Sometimes documentation changes to README or something like that, like if it's a markdown change, I'll just do them on GitHub, like directly. Mm-hmm. It cuts down a lot of steps. That's how I contributed to React Router. Yes, I did it without building locally. I was just relying on the CI/CD process to get to work. But I want to show how far you can get there without having to deal with environment setup issues. So this is something that's uniquely valuable in, or uniquely awesome to the process of contributing documentation. Hopefully you don't need to set up locally and get, maybe a different documentation engine going. But if the CI/CD stuff isn't integrated into the repo, we may need to copy it local. So I actually don't know if that's the case for Joy here, but let's go see if we can find it. So this is like, I guess, step one. Once you've identified our problem here, we need to now go and figure out where this documentation is. So I would look in this project here or in the Happy namespace or the organization's repo list. Maybe they have some changes recently that set up that website, or maybe they have a link to contribute to the doc or edit that page on the website, like some sites do at the very bottom there.
Yeah, so let's.
Did that open?
Oh. I think my browser is mad at me.
It appears so.
This truly is unscripted.
Huh.
Well, this is why we always have a backup browser ready.
You made the Firefox angry?
I guess so.
Oh. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so let's go to the API page. So let's see if we can just find on there the a link to contribute or edit or maybe their systems not like in life.
Probably.
Wait, did they? Oh, look, you see the version differences, 18 and then 16. They're probably in the middle of an update.
Oh, yeah.
So another thing to look for is an actively maintained project. It can suck that when something just has died and no one's there to maintain. I mean, open source maintainers don't owe anyone anything, but that, it can suck when you invest your personal time in and you're like, you were accepting things 3 months ago and they're like, oh, I've retired or I quit that. So sometimes you want to make sure it's a org or a project maintained by many people. So was there anything at the bottom of this page, or maybe Control F or look for Git or contribute or?
Yeah, so they do link to their GitHub here.
Okay, so the first thing I do is see if we can search in that search bar up top, like any of the words that are in, like, say, the titles of the page we were just looking at. So like
for the main Happy docs or for the Joy docs?
For the Joy docs. So I want to see, like, see how it says Joy lets you describe your data using simple, intuitive. Yeah. So copy that and let's see. So we're searching for it in this repo. So the fact that it doesn't exist in here makes me think that they have to have some docs in another project, which is very common. Sometimes you'll have like project name -website. So let's go back and look at the happy.js org and see what they got for repo. So click on the happy, yeah, okay, got it. So let's see, oh, there, top of list. They really did just do an update. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, you can see.
Okay.
Jump there. So then let's, oh, it's not in here.
Maybe just look for the word introduction. Like, it has to be there. Like it could be something that's like on multiple line breaks or something weird.
Yeah.
So let's look at the project again. It looks like a Nuxt, yeah. Let's see, where are they getting?
So static lib tutorials, talking about translations, but I feel like that's probably where,
our content should lie for.
yeah, it's static content.
So index there, is that the, or?
So this is grabbing all of our MD files.
Okay.
Which it looks like this is our,
so getting started.
yeah.
Oh, so this is just happy, the main happy site.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying earlier. Gotcha. So where is the path for the?
Yeah. So for joy, where was this? Oh, it was back
Was it?
here.
Yeah, Control 9, get to that last tab. Yeah, so here so family/joy. Okay, so let's go back and look at the repos because I want to see if they've maybe got some other content, or I guess we could look for the family folder in that happy.dev. I'd be interested to see if that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Can you search for what's on your clipboard on the organization?
That would be really nice if I could.
Hey, that looks exciting. What's the code one now?
Code question mark. You're really gonna make me sign in right now?
Yes.
Send that off screen.
Kill all Firefox and.
Oh no. Two-factor authentication.
Don't forget to check the remember me, damn it, box.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, you know it's a bad sign when you've got like. Oh, I only have the 2 YubiKeys on my keychain at the moment.
Yeah.
I got the new USB-C one. I'm really.
Oh, awesome. Here we go. Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so couldn't find it exactly. Oh no, okay, I see. Okay, perfect.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm glad it was able to find that. Glad we didn't put it in quotes. Perfect. So
it is in the Joy repo.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Looks like. And it was literally the top level API type.
Of course. Awesome. So even better, we can now go and just hit that edit button in the corner and just throw an edit together and get that as a pull request. So this is because we're on a specific hash up there on the tree dropdown.
So let's drop into master. And now we can edit it because this will allow us to branch off of, where we currently are instead of it being in a floating head state.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you do to, I guess, make this more concrete or copy pastable, or what things should we aim for here? Let's talk it out loud.
So for me, fundamentally, what I take issue with here is that, right, it's billed as an example. And yes, it is an example of using some of the code, and they do a really good job of telling a story here with this schema, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a username, we have a password, we require a repeat of the password, right? So, this is telling the story of registering a user. And then when it comes time to use this validation, they show the syntax for invoking validation, but the story kind of drops off. Mm-hmm. What we're doing or why we're doing any of it is no longer really being displayed here.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So what they do have here is a successful happy path, I guess, and then an error example, and then an async thing out of nowhere, which it seems odd just without any qualifications because it doesn't we're talking about synchronous data structures and operations. I mean, these are discrete values you can see in memory.
Mhm.
Unless I'm unaware that Joy has some hidden ability to like recursively wait for promises or something. But as far as I know, no. So let's focus on just the synchronous examples and maybe remove the async one. I think that should be in a different code block, if anywhere, because it needs some explanation.
All right, we'll just leave that hanging out there for now. We can
Perfect.
always revisit that.
Yeah, because also dash just doesn't really leaves a mystery.
Let's see. Can I get this slightly more legible for the folks at home?
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're just working on figuring out how to express this. Do we want to put it in an if statement? Do we want to set a temporary variable? Do we want to maybe use an example where you have a validate function where you just replace the value or return the value that's returned because the dot value is the object that met all the criteria. Otherwise, value is an empty object.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's think of maybe a step ahead, or maybe that's too early. I don't know. How simple do you think we need this to be initially versus like a good practice we want to set?
Yeah, well, at least what jumps out to me, right, is this kind of informal specification of, you know, oh, this is the return value of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is what we as a user would want to be able to go and do our stuff with. And, you know, there's a reason that we call schema.validate again here, and that's because this returns, you know, this error value, which then hypothetically in our program we would want to dispatch off of and, you know, handle the error case for this schema. And so that's what I would like to improve, at least initially, is, you know, what both more concretely, what is the return value and how do we use that?
So like maybe this is two-part because I think we need a separate like snippet, or actually, can you scroll down? They may have this repeated in isolation. Like I think there was a destructuring snippet somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Or
yeah, here we go.
There we go. So they do have an example that I think conveys what comes out of the object.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, go ahead.
Scrolls this far down and
exactly. So maybe this needs to be higher up as like just a simple example that combines this snippet with the one on 83 through 85, because it looks like a continuation, and the disconnect makes it seem a little harder to read.
Yeah. So even if this was something like, I don't know, tell me. You know, and we could just have, and then this is our value.
Mm-hmm.
Oop.
Well, it's the, oh yeah, okay. Oh, error, yeah.
All right. And then when we do the same thing with,
maybe put it in like curly braces so it's got block scope isolation for the consts.
Oh, that's
so you could copy paste it.
Yeah. But I think, ooh, 4 space tab.
I know, it's just.
Doing?
I know, it's like, I mean, it's like they're free. Come on, those 2 characters.
The space may be free, but my eyes certainly aren't.
Mm-hmm. It's like, what, they want you in an 80 column width now, and you gotta use 4 characters? This is gratuitous.
and I've just done a lot of work that I could have done with more judicious copy and pasting.
But I think that's, so just flip that. Well, maybe because it says like the username is required, maybe we should include the birth year to make it clear that what that empty object is, because it's kind of odd that it's.
That is a very good point. So then now our value, right, is going to be undefined, and then our error is going to be username is required.
And I'd be curious to know, like, if multiple failures happen, like, can it return multiple things? I'm not sure if that becomes an array or if there's any support for that, but that's my only other consideration.
Well, let us check their docs and see if they tell us.
I mean, but that's something that I think, like, right now we've already improved it and made it so, in theory, it should be copy pastable.
So it looks like it is assigned a single validation error object. So
invalidation error has.
Well, it says.
So why did our console just show or why did the example show a string?
Yeah.
The
input is valid.
Well, let's copy and paste their example and see what happens, because like that something isn't adding up.
Well, let's.
I think if we copy it into a replit, we can probably see it live.
Yeah, replits are things people use. I'm just about to spin up a local project. Oh, everyone wants me to log in today.
But you can hit the GitHub login. It'll be easy. Like, come on.
I guess that's true. Well, I was going to do Google, and I was like, I don't want everyone to see my email.
Now that you've got a job, you're all off the grid. And
yeah.
Okay.
Great. Awesome.
Looks good.
Thank you.
Closure.
Yeah, you gotta do the fancy stuff. Where's the giant new REPL button? There it is.
That was weird. Wait, I don't have those. I have node options. Are these different engines? No, it says node.
Yeah, I got my node here.
Okay, we're all good. So let's copy our whole schema with the require statement, and let's see if it goes and adds everything in here. So that's the goal. I want to make this easy for someone to just copy paste, get going, not hear const like thing is undefined errors or. Okay. Are they using tabs? Is that why our? Oh, let's see. Is there regex on the? Is that 11 or wait? Is that? Is that? That looks valid.
Yeah.
Maybe we found another bug.
Well, let's just try.
Let's just remove that. We could actually copy the rules from username, because basically that regex was the same as the rules for what's on lines 5 through 8.
Okay, yeah.
I guess I don't know if it was going to make it required, but joy.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So that's an interesting thing worth looking into.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So these the value of error is absolutely not a string.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it may have a toString that reduces to that, but so the details is an array. So let's try the example without the birth here. Let's see if it gets both. Or is it?
Yeah. If it just gets assigned to the first error or not. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like this schema is just exiting early on here.
I wonder if there's an option for multiples, or maybe this is a bug. I'd imagine this is something people would find, because if you're doing server assisted validation and you're not doing it client side as well, like you need to return like everything in one round trip.
Mm-hmm.
Errors, there we go.
So Joy throws her validation error. Detail should be an array of errors.
And
so this hypothetically should give us, right? Yeah, this is an array, so.
But it's only got one thing in it.
Mm-hmm. And
we have two missing things. So. Oh no, the birth year is just arranged. Add dot required to it, or give it, put it back and set the value like to 1800, because that would be outside the range.
Yeah.
Then we could test two different kinds of errors on it. Okay, that makes sense. There we go.
Oh.
So, wait, why does it say validation error username is required? And then it's like birth year 12. Oh, that's the original.
Yeah, this is the original value, and this should fail here. Let's.
Yeah, so, okay, so let's get rid of it then.
Oh, yeah, so that does
seem
to.
So it seems to be another bug or an oversight.
Well, this is the importance of good documentation, right? Is it forces you to prove that what you expect them to.
For sure. And so this is great, because now you can get some Hacktoberfest points. I can get some Hacktoberfest points. This is going to be great. So let's focus and just finish this one on the documentation's usability and copy paste ability. So let's get the let's just review this, see if we need to add any context.
Yeah, so we would need to change what's happening here with this error. And
so do we want to maybe do a like for the error, like I want to maybe create a function that's like, is user valid, or like is valid, and then use the schema inside it to assess true or false. Does it have an error? Like I want to give that use case that's super common.
Yeah, just like function, like obviously.
Or like I just want it to be like a specific thing, like is valid user or something, like use it at like name it like a predicate function.
Mm-hmm. And then we would something is happening with replit and indentation right now, which is interesting.
It's yeah. I'll try not to let my OCD
yeah.
could we just return if the error, okay, let's not get too fancy.
I was just going to kind of keep it consistent with the destructuring that they're going to see throughout the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So
do we want to include one, like an example that doesn't use it? Like it's kind of biased to. Like if we just did results and then results.error.
Yeah.
So at least then if they saw it down below and weren't familiar with destructuring, it wouldn't be like 0% helpful.
And I don't know, we could get fancier on how we choose to decide what we return off of this.
Yeah, I mean, we could return the user.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be the fancy way. You could do that in one line with just the schema.validate.
But Does Replit have good shortcuts? No.
Yeah, I always do weird things in my doc when I'm trying to use
Yeah.
my shortcuts. Did you notice the title? Whopping Afraid Scientist?
Yeah, that's about accurate.
It's like, I feel attacked. What the hell? Well, I'd leave in those other examples. Like, I think they just need to be like in a different block. Like,
Yeah.
they just need to be in a different code block. Or maybe the first example that is shown here should be a lot simpler than one that has like access token, birth year, like repeat, like that's a very meaty example that maybe just delete a lot of those fields, because a lot of them aren't really being like, email is super good to know that that's a pre-built-in validator. That's like probably one of the most important ones for business. But I mean, and it is only taking 2 lines, so maybe that is valuable. But birth year certainly doesn't belong on like 5 lines there. And access token as well. Like, cool, it takes arrays.
Yeah, part of me feels like I'm fine with having all of these examples in the schema, because as far as how I expect people would interact with this documentation, right, is they would pull it up and they'd want to see, like, how do I do the thing that I'm trying to do right now? And so, username and password, right, is someone trying to approach a validator, like that's probably what we're going to do. Email, and then maybe these repeat password, access token, birth year, right, these could be like moved to the bottom or something, where it's like, oh, we can have these kind of composite things, or we can reference other stuff.
I get those are all distinct features, so I see the value there for sure. And like, I could easily identify that this would support any data structure I've experienced, especially with the rules at the bottom there, the with username, birth year, XOR, like password, access token, to let you have either, the with password and repeat password. Like, those logical chaining methods are really awesome. So like, just seeing at a glance, like all the different things that can be done is really helpful, especially someone who's familiar with these types of needs or libraries. So I get it. I guess I'm playing with the idea of, could we make like a username and a password, or a username and maybe an email version, like, or maybe just email and comments, and just have that as a separate schema, and then have like, is feedback valid or something, and then just to show like the simplest version of like, oh, how this would look in your code end to end. But then underneath it, like, full kitchen sink example. I don't know, let's kick that around. I'd put a pin in that, and let's just focus on getting this thing copy pastable and like annotated properly.
All right.
So those like successful validation below. I don't even know if I'd change the order, because repeat password under password, like, arguably it should go there. Maybe access token should be right there with it. Like, if it's going to be interchangeable, I can see why they structured it this way.
Okay.
I mean, birth year, yeah, it is different, and it's showing you min and max. But if the rest of this made sense to me, like, I would assume that it can do what it's doing. Like, I don't know if that's really unique enough. That's like the one feature I'm like, I would be floored if it couldn't do that.
The only compelling thing that, no, I don't. Birth year does seem to be kind of the odd one out, in terms of, I guess it is non-required, but we're not even using that in any of the validation that we're going to want to be doing here.
Well, we can change it. Like, I'd rather do an email one in there, or show something like, because it says birth year on that line 46. But like, I just like, it takes up 5 lines in like pushing all the important stuff down the page. So let's just remove it and change it up to just use email, because that is, I think, the one auto one out. Perfect.
We'll use example.com responsibly.
Yep. So don't want to be spamming people randomly there. Um,
Let's make it topical.
should we put any labels in front of those console logs to show which one they are, like a string success or comma then value, or do we need to print the value out? Like if we're showing the error in the second example, like is that?
Could you say that again?
So could we comment out line 49 basically to just show that it is going to be undefined, but it doesn't, or it's not undefined. It's the object that came through.
No, for this one, I believe it doesn't return value
Well,
here.
Look at the one above, like see email joy at example, and then email joy example.
I feel like I'm just missing something you're saying.
So the where it says like original or underscore original on the right, colon email joy at example, that's coming from, yeah, right, what you're highlighting.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it's printed right above that, like right above the validation error.
Mm-hmm.
See how it says that? Yeah, so that's the value. So it's not undefined, it just echoes out the value.
Oh, really? Oh, oops, I wasn't even.
Apparently that's, yeah, so.
The previous docs had led me to believe this would be undefined in the case that it is.
Yeah, actually that's exactly what it showed. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I guess, just because it's in the README doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
Or the spec changed. Like I don't want to pick on Joy at all. Like this is stuff I find everywhere.
Yeah, I think they did overhaul some stuff recently, so I don't know.
No, they've definitely got a new website, and that's yeah.
So are we saying that like this is not necessarily valuable in the case that, you know, we already know that this is doing that?
Yeah, it's just echoing what is there.
Yeah.
So
then
that shows.
Would we want to do these console logs, because it's returning validation error, right? Which is, you know, some custom class that extends error, and we don't necessarily have a good grasp on like what that is actually going to look like to the.
Well, I think that toString is going to be that username is not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so that's cool. I mean,
that's not. I don't know. That's not use.
I don't know. I think it's not done, but I think we're getting somewhere. Maybe that, or actually, I think the property is error.message there is going to be username is required.
Yeah. Oh, that's more than likely true.
Yeah. So at least let's just make this like accurate. So when no one goes like scratching their head wondering like why it says something and then it's not doing what it says.
Mm-hmm.
So at that threshold, like, does this make sense? Let's just look it over. I don't know if unsuccessful validation is how I put that, because
yeah,
successfully validated, but
yeah,
invalid data.
That is a better way of phrasing that.
Okay. Maybe we take that isValidUser into a separate code block, because
yeah,
like that might need the schema defined in there as well. Because like
I
think like, sorry.
Well, no, it feels a bit odd, you know. Again, in the first case where we brought here, it's like, oh well, we did a thing, and it's like, why are we doing this?
Hmm.
That we define this nice function and then never use it or do anything with or about it.
Hmm. I think if we had a separate block that even defined like just maybe a different schema, even just
Hmm.
like or like I was saying, the comment or feedback
Yeah.
submission, we could see if like the feedback had a comment and an email attached. A really simple schema, but we could enclose it in a function and just return whether results.error was there, and then call it like, real world snippet or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. That could be something different. Let's just delete that, but let's keep this as tidy as possible. It's a good idea to do that whenever you're doing open source contributions,
Hmm.
um, just because it is a lot harder for maintainers to deal with when they see just like too much noise in the contribution, even if it's converting from tabs to spaces
Yeah.
accidentally. Anything like that just makes it more of a pain. So if we're just focused, it'll make it much more likely to get approved. So I think I'm feeling good about this. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling decent about it. The one thing, and I'm not sure there's a way around it, without using bars, but having these scopes in here might confuse someone who is not, incredibly confident in their JavaScript knowledge of what's going on here.
Yeah, I guess that is true. It is probably assuming too much that block scoping like that is common or is familiar at all.
Yeah.
Because yeah, if we tried to just change the second one to just if we used let and then reassign them, that'd be you'd have one that would have the benefit of being declared, and it'd just be weird.
Hmm. Um,
That is a benefit of having the function though. We could just
hmm.
I mean, so like my threshold was really just hoping to be able to copy paste the example and just throw it in
Okay.
here. So like that's really what I was hoping to be able to do. Like if I am messing with a library and I can't copy the big example on their homepage, like it's just I know I'm in for a little more work, and sticking together code through multiple blocks of text and throwing stuff at the wall sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe the issue here is that we're not the console logs like kind of just are unqualified. Like we don't have a. Do you
Yeah.
want to like put a string label as the first argument? Because we can put multiple arguments to the console log and just like put a string up front to be like valid,
Yeah.
and then quote comma.
It's anything we want in there. I do also realize that because we changed the password stuff, that is now required, and that's failing.
Well, because it was specifying 3 to 30 characters, and you're starting and closing uh, regex match the caret and dollar.
Yeah,
I mean, there's I don't know if it's worth turning it into an instance. It should work. Like,
yeah, I'm just like nerd sniping.
yeah, this is what I was about to start doing after.
Why doesn't it like the
There's totally a gotcha in the detecting instance of regex. The
Huh.
I would have expected that to work though.
Yeah, I would too.
Well, let's package this up and we can switch on to this because I got like some tricks I'd like to try on this, or if you got time.
Yeah. So what would you like to do with the password? Do we just want to remove it from now? Do we want to leave it like this and assume that we'll make it work, or?
I think so, because it's broken now, so I wouldn't want to include it in a README so people think it will work.
Okay.
In the patch that fixes the bug is where I'd
Yeah.
actually re-add it into the
Okay.
docs. So,
And,
well, I'd just put it back maybe. Oh wait, we're not using it right. It is used on those that XOR and with the stuff on 19 and 20 is really important.
oh yeah.
Um, Let's add it back, but without all the rules. Let's just make it a joy.spring and we'll just leave it as a placeholder.
Okay.
Like it's imperfect.
Yeah.
And look, the maintainer may ask to,
Yeah.
copy the username or switch it back or whatever. Like, but that I think it's an out of scope decision for us to make. And the maintainer will probably have an opinion on that. So I just don't want to turn in anything that doesn't meet that whole, you can copy paste it. So.
And why is it telling me things about
Why do I have a different error there?
birth year? Username required.
So on line 22,
yeah.
birth year, get rid of that line. Or maybe leave email in there. So email and username. Does that make sense? That'd probably be an XOR. Maybe.
Yeah. So we're discovering maybe why they had things the way they were. We can add.
Yeah, I'll just do birth year. Yeah, make it a just joy.integer. Do we want to put all those other constraints in? I mean,
You know what? I'm just going
the replet getting to you there.
it's just starting to make my brain melt a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm being attacked by my cat. Oh my God. She really wants attention. Cat, I got you.
What they do best. Because now this is starting to get, right, we're having a non-trivial amount of stuff that we want to validate.
I mean, but are we showing, wait a second. So that is an error on that first thing that's supposed to be valid. How was that working before?
It was never working because we were getting errors on one thing or another, where we weren't having a birth year or we weren't having an email or something. So joy.integer is not a function. I think it's supposed to be a number because JavaScript.
Value must.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so this example is far away from actually being and working because we do need, right?
A password. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, make sure your quotes are not. Make sure you're using single quotes. And
no, that's a good point. I don't want to find and replace. Do I want to find and replace everything except this line?
Good spot.
Okay.
Maybe put the password next to the username, or
yeah.
I think that people would expect that.
And what do we want as our fake password?
Super secure.
All right. Oh, now we need a repeat password.
Okay, so we're finding it's working, but goddamn, like.
Yeah, this is also frustrating that it will not continue to parse the schema and then give us all the errors. So, right, hey, we're finding ergonomic issues. All right, there we go.
Okay, so, okay, that sounds good, or looks good, and I think that passes the sanity check. So should we maybe put a label on that second, on the last error there, error.message, just label it as such so that,
Oh yeah.
I guess, yeah, I mean, it is commented. I don't know. I think it's just seeing the, maybe put a colon in there, or?
Yeah, that's good. Just make it visually distinct.
And then maybe the same for input value, and capitalize that I, make it consistent, and then.
Oh yeah, I tossed that in there fully expecting to change something about that.
Okay. Okay.
And I think just Replit is messing with my spacing because this is.
Yeah, I think people will. Okay. Okay, I think. Do we need to put anything with that other console log error undefined, or? It should be, maybe just label it as falsy or something, or I don't know.
Or it's some, no error.
Perfect. I mean, let's run it. Let's see how it looks. No. Cat, you're shedding. Wow.
All right. So how are we feeling about this?
I think it's better. Oh, make sure your quotes on the no error bit are single quotes. I think everything.
Oh,
habits.
Guess I really like double quotes.
I think everything looks balanced, and some matches the other side. I think we're in business.
All right. So I obviously use my text editor because that's where I'm comfortable editing text. But as far
usually
as
you can use a Replit.
Yeah, well, I mean, just also like editing in this Markdown editor is so wonderful because, like, if you notice a typo in documentation, like the mental effort required, especially when you're not, someone who the Git flow is second nature to, like forking the project, cloning it, like, making your changes, committing it, like opening a pull request across the fork. It's like
those are all a lot of steps that you'd have to do at the command line, and we're not going to have to do that here.
Mm-hmm. So I created this the way that I like to, but all it takes is, pasting it in, and GitHub is ready to handle all of those bits for me. So we do have our asynchronous.
Yeah, I think let's just delete that for now. It just needs a better, like, it needs a better introduction than that, and it's just too much noise in that intro block.
Okay, so we do have this explanation of the schema that has now changed.
Yeah, let's check our.
So password is going to be different. Birth year is going to be different.
So we just delete the line about the regex on password, and we maybe birth year, just say it's a number.
Well, technically all of these, or I guess, yeah, no, because they don't do anything else. So yeah. And then birth year, just an integer. Is that what we're doing there?
Yeah.
All right.
and that was to get closer to the just have less repetitive stuff, even though min and max were unique in that example. I just there's so many other things available here that yeah.
And then for consistency's sake, they are marking, you know, password token is optional. So I feel like
okay,
one of those, and then the email is required, right?
It doesn't say required. Well, what I guess, does min domain segments enforce it, or?
You know, let's pop into our replit and see what happens when we
Yeah, this is where it would be really nice to see the multiple arrows just come through.
Yeah.
Oh, we may want to get rid of our trailing comma on that birth year object, because they don't have trailing commas elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't have my linker set up.
Yeah, and I keep going back. A lot of the stuff we've been doing is a lot about consistency, because that you want to just be a coding chameleon when you're doing open source. Just whatever they're doing, just copy. The maintainer will love you for it.
Yeah, so I guess email is technically optional, because removing it does not
give that. So let's fix that to just remove the saying that it's required.
All right. So where were we? There we were. Yeah, I guess it doesn't say it's required, but do we want to say, you know, an optional valid email address string? And
yeah. Would it be optional comma? Or no, that's, oh, it's because, sorry, access token has a comma because it's got a list at the end, the string or number. Never mind.
Well, this is where my grammar is going to fail me, right? Because it's an optional. Do we need a comma separation on the adjective list here?
I don't think so.
It's an optional.
Maybe and, like an optional and valid, or that sounds weird for an optional to be leading.
No, because you can't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be optional and. Well, I feel like valid is somewhat of a misnomer here, because it's like, well, yes, that's you're validating this for me, like, oh, an optional invalid email address string is like.
Well, why don't we just say an optional string or an optional well-formed email, like well-formed.
And I do think my brain is converging that yes, we do need the comma there.
Mm-hmm. An optional well-formed email address string. And the word string shoehorned in there is weird, but I'll just go with it.
They're hating on domain must have two parts. You know, you can't send an email from com, which that is technically a valid domain.
I mean, the RFCs for email are nightmarishly long and include so many weird things, like do you know you can send an email to an IP address? Did you know you can't just do an @ symbol and an IP? Do you know how you have to include it?
Oh, that's awesome.
It's with square brackets. You say @ open square bracket, IP address, close square bracket. That's just, which obviously, right?
No, that's
so like, yeah, and of course no one actually expects emails that way today or sends them. Like you'd be mad, like that's madness. But it technically is a well-formed. There's like 2 RFCs for emails, I believe, and one of them has like that rule in it. And like, so there's so many of those edge cases in email that are like, it's one of those areas that is a legendarily complex regex. In some
Hmm.
examples I've seen fill up an entire page. And that's really the best example or the best reason to use this kind of a library,
Yeah.
because you can just bury that concern. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
you can,
There's the email regular expression that mostly works. That is.
so that's probably going to include like the most normative, like the most common
Yeah.
examples. But yeah,
But
the full page, we might have to search for the RFC.
yeah. Well, and that's just why, like, whenever you're like, I need to validate a thing, oh, I'll use a regular expression. It's like, should you?
Yeah, it's one thing if it's like I need to validate like a UPC code or like the
Yeah.
format of like, just some raw text structure,
Hmm.
but not if, yeah, it's something that is deceptive like a regex for an email. Like, phone number, maybe that's easy, but as soon as you get international codes or
Yeah.
other things, that can get a little weird. Having to support extensions, suddenly your assumptions of, oh, this phone number thing should be easy,
Yeah.
throw that out the window. So
If
usually find your own.
Yeah, if
Or
your data is super regular, then use a regular expression.
or if you're very adept at using them,
Yeah.
because they've definitely saved me a lot of pain when I'm dealing with data that is not structured and really crummy.
Yeah.
But I've had to spend so much time with it, so
Yeah.
much time.
It's also great if you want no one else at your job to be able to touch that line of code.
100%. Yeah, I think regex is like the most intimate kind of code you could write. It's very personal and it's in public, but no one can really translate it but you. Okay, let's see if we can just send this commit off or get this pull request shipped and out the
All right.
door.
I want to just real quick scroll through the rest of the general usage, right? Because at least I encountered some surprises in how I expected this to work. So if there's some low-hanging fruit here of like, oh, errors don't work that way, then we might as well catch it.
But this is where we discovered the validation error object thing, like
Yeah.
on line 103, 104, 105, and then.
Yeah, if the input is invalid, error is assigned, yeah, to the validation error object. Or it can be a joy type directly. Okay. Values. Okay, yeah, and then it gets into the more specific stuff. All right, so that seems fine to me. We can preview changes to make sure that I
We didn't
haven't
like forget any
malformed.
line breaks or something.
Or forgot, one of the backticks, and now suddenly this example is
Of course.
right. So I'm gonna zoom out slightly. So we're taking out the red code block here, and we're adding in this, and what is this
That's
closing?
the initial joy object. So
Oh, okay, yes, so that's closing this, and then this is here. How do we feel about that
let's
level?
unindent those a layer because that's a little
Yeah.
that should be, I think, aligned with that bracket. Good spotting.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying about making sure that everything matches. We don't want to give anyone an excuse to be like, that formatting is weird. Like, I'm just not going to accept this, rather than fixing it.
Mm-hmm. And like we are kind of touching on code. Like the threshold was just make this easier to start with, just copy paste, get going,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of fixing this indent might be the job of somewhat a different pull request. Like this may need to be like more circumscribed. But I think right here, let's see, is it okay? Did it unindent, or do we need to do
Oh,
another?
I did it by 2, but yeah.
Can you just highlight Shift Tab them, or? or
If
that.
that's if that is a shortcut that works, I have no idea.
No, that's the unindent magic. Yeah, either control left curly brace or control right to indent,
What
but sometimes the browser goes back and forth, like uses back
would
navigation.
wouldn't it make a lot more sense if it were Escape Shift V, left angle bracket?
Oh, the terminal humor. Um, that is, so at least it's aligned now with the email access token, like the indented keys.
Mhm.
I don't know, it just feels a little weird still. I don't know. I think this or one more would be good, but it's definitely
Oh,
better than where it was.
do you want to bring it all the way against here?
Um, I'm good either way. Before it just looked bizarre with
It
the.
it did. I'm not sure why Emacs decided to indent it like that. I don't know if parsing is doing something weird.
I mean, I think it was like that to begin with. I mean, look at the red one.
Well, I guess that's true. Yeah.
What am I?
Well, no,
Are we missing something?
mine had 6 spaces. It was a
Oh,
triple indent. So
got it.
we're going from 4 down to 2.
Okay, that's back to where it was, I guess. So
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
All right.
So what's that yellow? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is our mixed blocks of changes, right? We're simplifying birth year. We're clarifying email, and removing the regular expression on password because it's currently broken, which
We will address another time.
because that's rather important for this library. Would it be worth it to test that locally real fast to make sure that Replit isn't, I don't know, grabbing, a slightly outdated, version where it was broken or something like that? I have no idea.
I mean, I think if we go to the package lock, we might be able to even change it. Not like, let's just look at that. I think where is it?
It's 617. I think that's the current version. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is the current version's one that's broken. We're submitting a README that will get it aligned. It doesn't help anyone to have a broken, like, I think that this had to be removed because we couldn't meet the standard of copy pastable. And so, it doesn't help anyone to just dust it under the rug and pretend it's still working.
All right, cool. So then our changes feel good.
Okay, so this is where githubs.com is going to save us a lot of pain in having to do this through command line.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really, I think, an important part. So Henry, do you want to talk through this process?
Yeah, so at this point, we're kind of bundling up 2 normally separate steps of our Git process, right? Where we would make our commit, and that would include a commit message, which would describe our change that we're making. And then when we made a pull request, which is a GitHub-centric feature, not really a Git feature like a commit is, we have the opportunity to give our pull request a title and an extended description, and usually this will auto pull our Git commit message if we only have one. But the idea here is, right, our commit message describes our changes, but this is where we can talk a bit more about our intent in the pull request, right? So this is where, we would want to say, like, hey, so we removed the regular expression thing from the password because it's currently broken. And if we want this example to be copy pastable, so this is kind of where we proposed our changes and why they're valid.
So I guess the thing is, do we want to just say like what we hope to do, like make this copy pastable, or make the example more applicable or readily applicable? Because what I'm thinking is, I want whatever we type in here as our title or our main message is going to be automatically used or auto completed when we click propose file change, that'll be the suggested title of the pull request. It may be that you want it to be different because this commit message, maybe it's just you're starting a process where you'll keep committing to this branch, and eventually you'll make it a pull request. Because you can open a pull request that is a draft or some specially marked that it's not ready, and keep working on something. So sometimes I'll have an idea and just throw up a pull request marked as draft. We'll actually see that on the next page. But for here, Henry, let's just pick some description here that is appropriate for our changes.
What do we want here? All right, let's start with something and then improve this.
Yeah, this is less important than the PR title. Like the commit messages are important. Like it really does help if a maintainer is trying to generate or use tooling to generate a change log, and you want to make sure your change gets adequately described. So this is usually where that's pulled from. So think about like what one-liner you want to point out. Sometimes the tools will pull from the pull request title. It depends on the actual change log generator.
Yeah, and that was my bad explaining this too. I guess I have not used the Markdown editor in a while and didn't realize it will give us the full pull request.
And so they're automatically forking here, by the way. So this UI has changed recently, or in the past like 6 months or so, maybe more. So yeah, read that message at the top here. So you may be thinking, well, how are we able to edit this thing? Well, it says we've created a fork this project for you to commit. I don't know if it has already, but I think when you submit this, it will. Because I think I've like backed out of making changes and I go to fork it, and it's and it's still something I can fork. So I think if we just go and propose this.
Do we want to use a bit stronger language? Because it is, their example is broken, right?
Actually, 100%. So
yeah,
while we started to do to correct something that had to do with how people process the example, and just a mismatch in how the code flowed into those, repellent sort of represented outputs that just hope you figure them out. We found that it actually is broken. So I think it's fair to say correct or fix documentation example, like straight up, like it ain't working. Okay, let's propose. Let's go to the next screen. It's not actually going to make the PR, the pull request, but it will land us on the next interstitial page or intermediary page. So our branch here is called patch 1. You can see on the right there, it was automatically created as patch 1. It used to give you the ability to name your branch. Unfortunately, or I don't know if it's unfortunately, I mean, I don't know, these branches, once they get merged, you can just delete them. So maybe it's good that you don't have to also think of naming your branch. Well, let's go ahead and just create the pull request and just keep going, because that's usually my next step.
Ooh, this is a great reminder. That they have contributing guidelines and a code of conduct.
So it's a good idea to scan any of these sorts of docs if your project has them. So see how it says, like, in most cases, best to ask first about making a contribution rather than spending valuable time on a contribution. That's a great piece of advice. But in this sort of process I outlined, you're really just taking advantage of work you've already done. So Henry and I have been cognitively teasing out like all the steps along the way, and sometimes you find new things, but sometimes we're taking advantage of basically work we've already done. And so in that mindset, like it's sometimes easier just to make the pull request rather than even formulate the whole proposal, because you've got the code, you've got the solution.
Especially, for this small change. And this is like, if I had decided to set up Joy for, a project today that I was working on, I would have immediately found like, boom, regular expressions don't work. I would have been like, oh, okay, I guess I have to work around that. And then like, boom, oh, errors are not strings, right? They're objects. And so at the very least, it's like I've already figured out the two biggest pieces of this puzzle. And then while I'm in there, right, I can make things a little bit better. So I'm not spending days doing this, and then they're going to be like, that's not the direction we want to take the project.
Oh yeah, and that's the draft thing. So when you're creating the pull request, you can click that drop down and then be like, hey, this is draft. And you can switch that off as the submitter or the pull request author. So we reviewed the guidelines. Yeah, they may not be looking for this, but I suspect this is a real fix. So I would keep the message short and sweet. Set out to make the examples copy pastable. Discovered some other issues, and we'll create some issues for each of those issues you mentioned.
It's important to spell things correctly.
Yep. Yeah, it's, relatively important. Copy pasta.
Yeah, I think they can deal with that one. So what was that? Set up to make documentation copy pastable.
So in so doing, or we discover, or I discovered a couple other.
I'm gonna use the I here.
It's like me and my imaginary friend here. My rubber ducky I used for coding. So I found other issues were discovered. Or I discovered issues affecting the current version. We didn't look into previous or when, we didn't do any regression analysis.
Both regular. How do I want to phrase this?
The regular expression causes an error. I don't know if we need to even say the password. Just okay. Is it so the validation error? It doesn't seem to be returning multiples is one side of it, but it's also incorrectly labeled as a string, which I think we fixed. So let's point out the error with the array only ever contains one error. The validation.
Yeah. What do they call that field?
Is it details or? Look at the replit. Yeah, I don't trust the docs. Let's look at the replit.
So then let me pop off message here. Details, yeah.
Okay.
And where am I? There we go. And the validation error details for only one error. Was it an error or an error message? It's an error.
I guess it's like okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, this is short and to the point. It's, I used to have be under the impression I had to be, really loquacious and, really use the words up here and just make the maintainer's life easier.
Yeah. You used a word earlier that I really liked in regards to the error being represented as a string rather than an object.
I might have to check the tape. I don't know.
Well, I will just go with what I.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was presented or represented. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Sometimes, if it's a multiple things like this, I do maybe put bullet points for the separate unrelated things, or.
Yeah, so we could do something like. just so it's, again, a bit more parsable.
Mhm. Yep. There you go. I guess, does it need to say also represented or what? We could just submit this. I think it's human friendly enough.
All right. Anything else?
That's simple enough. Usually I always say thanks for the library, but just often maintainers surprisingly don't actually hear that. Like, oh, 10,000 downloads or whatever, but sometimes it's just nice to hear thanks.
This is a joke.
Mm-hmm. You could be cheeky, but as well-meaning as you like. Yeah. So, okay, I think. Perfect. I think that looks good.
All right. Well, then there we go.
Yay! So you got 1 down and 4 more to go to get your free Hacktoberfest shirt. And
yeah. One of the things that it also may have been worth doing beforehand was to check these issues just to see if someone had
that's a very good point.
Having conversations about documentation and maybe encountered the errors that we had. But
that's a very good point. I should point out this is something that was on my radar. I checked the issues beforehand, but really good point that it's very much worth it because there may be other things that you're not aware of, and it sucks to do an edit and then realize, oh, this feature is going away or it's being removed or whatever. And there was a whole discussion going back a year, and you just forgot to look. Just totally happened. So let's see. I wonder if the continuous integration is actually building a deploy. You can click on the details, and it'll actually show you Travis's output. Oh wow, it's got to build a lot of different platform combinations.
Oh boy.
It's got Windows in there. Oof, that's a fancy setup.
This is a lot. Which again, that is surprising me why regular expressions would be.
I mean, that's odd that it didn't get picked up, but again, maybe there was something overlooked in the test.
Yeah. Well, I did everything I could.
Yeah, I mean, and you only said it was the current version that it's not working on, and like maybe there's some missing. Maybe the option is .regex or .expression instead of pattern. I don't know. Maybe something else was wrong with that code, but regardless, like something was wrong with it. So
yeah.
And I think so. Things are looking good so far. What I normally look for. So if you go back to the Travis CI tab, I think it used it. You may have to hit back a few times. Or you can just click on the link to go to the. I think it just ate your tab.
To my pull request, or
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So give it a sec. When you so you can see the orange or yellow dot there is just letting you know it's still running.
Yeah.
Usually, oftentimes projects that have sites like that will have their sites actually auto deployed to a testing branch, so you can preview what the docs would look like.
Oh yeah.
That might be associated with the happy.dev main doc site, and it may be incorporating all the other repos into it. So we may, whatever the org's processes are to update their docs, we just are left to assume that they'll be able to track this as a part of generating the next website. And of course, it'll be live immediately in the Git repo if you happen to notice as an API.md. Cool. Well, do you think there's any other points I've missed or you've missed here?
I don't know. I think this was pretty good. Would you see documentation that, you struggle with? That's, kind of the best thing. I think, something I hear so commonly from, developers who are like, oh, I want to start making open source contributions. It's like, how do I find a project to make contributions on, right?
And
Websites and the tagging and stuff, and it's like find a thing you're using, right? Because you have
anything.
of like issues that have bothered you, and it's so much better to fix something that you've encountered rather than searching for a problem to then both understand and try to fix. So
Totally. I mean, this is like, we overlook so many things that, and we often internalize, just assume that this must be me. Like clearly it's a user error, when it's not even, usually it's not even a proper error in the docs even, it's just confusing. Or maybe this, smashing 3 usage examples with 2 synchronous and then an asynchronous all together there was a little odd. And especially with the await example, it didn't even have a closing async, which, there's no top level await is still an inbound. So like it just, as it's set, like it wasn't really, it was odd. So we set up to just fix this clarity issue and discovered some other things, but even just adding to the clarity, or separating out stuff to make it a little more digestible. It's not even saying that the library has a flaw or a problem. It's just saying like, hey, this library could be used more widely or could be more welcoming to beginners. And hurried seniors alike, for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, let me end with a give me a 3 things we learned here. Like, what are the big takeaways? Like, what are the major points that, from your perspective, you come away with?
Yeah, big takeaways for me is, definitely leverage your experience, with the project and its immediacy to fix these issues. Because, one of those things you talked about is we internalize like, oh, it's just me. Like, as you keep using it, you might correct that. But, the tooling makes it easy for you to fix things as you come across these. So use that GitHub Markdown editor to, let's see.
Well, we eliminated a lot of steps, really.
Yeah.
And that's unique to documentation usually. Like for code or things that involve multiple files, you probably need to clone the repo.
Yeah.
Not absolutely required, but yeah.
Yeah. I really like, from one of the conceptual takeaways for me, right? The idea is this at a minimum must be copy pastable, where I think I was much more concerned about like, oh, how is the user going to interpret the flow of this? And I probably would have hemmed and hawed about that for a very long time, like reordering things and writing it and making it nice before I ever thought like, hey, let's run this. And oh, everything's broken and it doesn't work. So, make sure your code examples are complete. They don't always have to be, minimum, working examples that have, the requires and everything. But at the very least, if someone takes what you've written and puts it into their code, it shouldn't be horrendously broken.
Yeah, it's always a great feeling when you copy an example and it just works.
Yeah. And then don't be afraid to thank your maintainers.
Exactly. Love it. That's awesome.
Wonderful work for us, and I think we all know how nice it feels to be recognized for stuff that we've done. So
exactly. So I love it. I think those are excellent top line items, and I think that concludes our session, Henry. Next time we should definitely do this live and get an audience going. I'm really excited to hopefully do that.
Yeah. And I'm happy to do that as soon as I debug my Linux graphics drivers issues. So
used to be my story of my life. Happy to help there, but to the viewers at home, see ya.